Hello gorgeous people, it's Kate here again with another video for Lulu Art, and today I'm creating a beautiful card with Tim Holtz's floral bouquet stamp. Cut the piece of card in half, making sure to have the pieces you're going to cut out all intact, and the card base a bit larger than you might need it so that you have a bit of room to move, and so that if any bits look not so great or not quite as nice as some of the others, you can trim those off. So next I'm going to sit here and colour the images. This one just parts of it, this one the whole thing, with my Jane Davenport alcohol markers. And I'm using both sets, so Mermesmerrising and the Feathered Friends. So I'm going to use both of those sets. Now I'm going to use fairly simple techniques here because the stamp is very busy. So I'm going to lay down a base colour of whatever is lightest. So if it's green, it'll be light green. If it's purple, it'll be light purple. Followed by a darker colour just to give a bit of depth and shade, and then finally add probably a touch of purple over the top to add shadows. And I'll do that with each colour because, as I said, this is so much going on here that it's going to be visually quite busy, so I'm just going to keep my colouring quite simple. So if you haven't used these before, what you're going to want to do on this piece of paper, which will be scrap and cut out, test each colour before you start colouring with it, just to get a feel for how dark it is, what kind of tone it is, and perhaps even what layers nicely over the top. So as I said, test the colours, and of course they've got two tips, this fatter one and this sort of bullety one, so you can get some nice detail. Test which light green you would like as your base. Okay, I'm going to use the brighter one, and I'm just going to colour all of the leaves with that. Now colour slowly and make sure that what you're colouring is leaves. As I said, the design gets a little bit detailed, so it's not always easy to tell at first glance. So colour what you know is a leaf first, then go back and start filling in other little bits and pieces. Keep turning the card and make sure you're looking at it from different angles. Time to add a little bit more depth to the leaf colours, and I've just got markers. So that original marker I used was Toucan, and now I've got Parakeet and Lorikeet, and I'm just going to go over with both of these colours to darken up the leaves, just for a little variation. Now wherever it's darker on the image, use the darker marker. Part of the reason I chose the blue ink, the Paris Dusk, is because I know how beautifully it's going to blend in with these greens and purples that I'm planning to use. Right, so that's just added a few extra touches to the green, and lastly for the Parakeet. Now I'm just going to use the fine end of the Parakeet and just use it to add an extra layer of depth to some of these leaves. Okay, so what I've discovered is I can start with a base of wing. Alright, so starting with the palest purple marker, which is wing, don't colour in the flowers, just colour over the darker areas of blue ink to give them a little bit more depth. You don't want to take away too much of the light white areas on those flowers, or else it's going to look very flat and plain and boring. So just start slowly by adding a little bit of wing to wherever the darker areas of ink are, wherever there's more ink. Now in some instances you'll want to use the fat end, in some instances the skinny end, just whatever is working, and just go over some of those darker bits. Now some areas you'll want to do strokes, others little dots, just whatever is needed to add a little bit of colour on here without completely covering the detail on the image. But again, remember, don't cover up all of those beautiful light white bright areas. You'll need those later. Now if you only have a few limited colours of alcohol marker, you can create depth and tone by going over and then going over again with the same colour, which will make it a little bit darker. That's just what I'm doing here. Alright, so at this point I'm going to get the colour called Mountain Gem, which is quite dark. I'm just going to get the very fine tip here and use this to add a little bit of much darker colour to my design. Now use the original colours as a guide, so wherever the ink is darker, start there. Now very carefully add a little colour to some of those flowers. Now if you're more comfortable using pencils, you can absolutely do this part in pencil. Alright, getting a bit more life. So I'm just going to use those same colours and start colouring a few of my embellishment pieces. Now I'll fast forward this because I'm just using exactly the same techniques as I've already used. Play with the layering and see where you like the look of things. And then we can move on to the background. Now that I've got some colour on here, I've been able to decide to cut the card down. It's not quite A6 normal card size, it's slightly bigger, but I think it shows off all of the best bits of the image. So now it's time to add a little background colour. And I'm going to use a few stencils to add a bit of extra zing. And I've got the Stampers Anonymous Concerto and Speckles. And this one's just got lots of little spots, and this one's music notes. So I'm going to start by using some archival ink and add just a bit of almost a border to this. So I'm going to start with pale ochre. Next I'm going to use some Distress Oxide and Antique Linen. Now as you gradually get less and less ink on the little applicator, move closer to the flowers and colour a little bit over the top there. And that way it just blends that colour onto the flowers without making it too strong. So start from the edges and then sort of use it to blend across. Alright, so once that first colour is done, and that's the Antique Linen Distress Oxide, go over with the Antique Linen Distress ink. Just a few little swipes. And then I'm going to use the Gathered Twigs Distress ink just to darken up those edges. And you can see the beautiful subtle background effect from that lovely Concerto stencil. Make sure to add a little colour to all the sides. I like to make sure the edges are much darker in colour so it really draws the eye to the flowers. Right, so that's it for the Gathered Twigs, another Distress ink. Now it's time to add a few little splatters. Now I'm also going to do this with the little Distress ink tool because it allows me to be a bit more precise. So I'm going to start with Distress Oxide in Peeled Paint. Lift it up, have a look, make sure that the splatters are looking like you would like them to. You can add a bit more or a bit less. So that was Peeled Paint. Next I'm going to use a little bit of Seedless preserves. And lucky last, shaded lilac. I'm just going to spray this with water. And then lay it across the distress ink face down. And then once more, just here. And then blot with paper towel. Which will take some of the water and colour off. And you can see what it's done, and it might not be quite as visible when it's dry, but it just gives a little bit of patterning to the background. You can see that the card is now starting to come together. We've got the vintage tones, you've got a little bit of background colour that matches and blends in with the flowers. It's got that card look to it, so it's starting to happen. Now it's time to add some depth and dimension to the coloured images using Jane's Magic Wand pencils. Add colour to any of the white areas on the flowers and add depth and gorgeous darkness and shading to some of those leaves to really make some elements pop and others fade towards the background. It's time to move on to colouring the berries with the Jane Davenport Magic Wands. Now these are lovely and creamy, and I'm sticking to just a few colours for this. And as I did with the alcohol markers for the base, for the top sections I'm just following the stamped images. So I'm laying down the lighter colours where there is the most light, the most open space on the image, and the darker colours where you've got the pattern, design and shading. Now I'm really only using a couple of colours here, especially for the purples, and adding a little white at the end just for some highlights. And this is working so beautifully. I'm getting lovely rich colours on here that are coordinating with that background because I've used the same Magic Wand pencils to colour the background image, but just not as darkly. So I have not added quite as much colour on the background images as I have on the foreground, just so that there's a bit of differentiation between the back, which I want to sort of fade a little, and the front, which I really want to pop out. Use the darker coloured pencil to pick out some of the shapes and add a bit more definition to the flowers. It doesn't even matter if it's a dark purple or a dark blue, it just adds a little bit of bit more shape because you tend to lose it as you colour. So just add that in a little bit here. Now I'm probably going to cover up this flower with my little buds and berries, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't add some detail on this as well, because you never know what parts are going to peek out. Now you can also go and emphasize some of the leaves if you like, because when you go over these with the Distress Oxide ink, sometimes they get a little bit pale. Just don't go too dark. Alright, so now that I've got a little bit more definition in here, I could go and add some black. I don't know how dark I want to make this. The berries are standing out beautifully, so I might just go and darken up some of these little whiter areas back here so it doesn't look quite so pale. Now I'm just using the black pencil, but I'm using it very, very lightly so that the colours underneath still show through. Now I've also used that same picking out the shapes section on some of these really pale flowers over here, just to give them a little bit of oomph. Now with the berries back here, I'm going to very carefully add some of this black, just to help pick out their shape, because as I was saying, they tend to lose it a bit as you colour. Just don't go too hard, you're not trying to give them black outlines. A little bit of double-sided foam tape to the back of your additional elements and see where they might look best. Alright, so I've just got some expressive foam tape here, which is my favourite. These guys make the best tapes. And I've got 2 different sizes. And then I have this little sprig of leaves. Now I'd actually done another flower, but I don't think it needs it. Okay. Alright, so now I've got the main elements of the card, and it's time to start adding the final touches. So it might be a little bit of text, might be a bit of ribbon, a bit of shimmery stuff, knowing me. We're almost there. So before I do anything else, I'm going to add some glossy accents to those little berries. Now, to finish off this gorgeous card, now that all of the elements are dry, I'm going to use a gorgeous little chipboard hello and sit it here. But I'm going to need to cover it with some embossing powder first. I think I might go Caesar's Gold. It's just got a little bit more of the caramel kind of colour. Alright, now that that decision's made. Now this is still one of my favourite bits after all of the years that I've been doing it, because just watching that embossing powder change colour is super cool. Now, as it turns out, those colours are a little similar. So what I've got is this stunning... Now, it looks fairly consistent until you tilt it, and you get just this hint of different colour at the bottom. It almost looks like I bought one. It's really pretty. I don't know if I can show you on camera, but those 2 colours, it just looks like there's almost just a hint of darker of the same colour at the bottom, just by layering those 2. Really nice. Now, before I do much else, I'm actually going to add a layer of backing card to the panel, just to strengthen it. Now, I'm going to let this dry before I keep going, just so that I don't get any warping from the glossy accents. And we'll come back and finish the adding of the final embellishments and mounting onto the cardstock. And the card is finally finished. Now, what I've done as the finishing touches, apart from stick down the beautifully embossed chipboard piece, the additional piece of cardboard has held this front panel completely flat, so that when you have a look, it is dead straight. It is absolutely perfect. No wrinkling, no buckling, nothing. So that worked beautifully. I've got little bits of stickles on the flowers here, and little touches in different coloured stickles around the leaves and some of the other flowers. You can see the platinum stickles just here on the little berries, just to differentiate them a little. And I've got a touch here on the tiny berries as well, just so that it looks super cute. And of course you can see the gorgeous Prima little adhesive gems peeking through the back here. And then I've got these gorgeous little black miniature balls, again from Prima, and some wonderful chunky glitter just sort of peeking out from behind that flower cluster, just to accentuate that raised section, so it's a little bit different from the background, and so it really stands out. So I hope you have enjoyed my Mother's Day, hello, birthday card, whatever you would like to make it. I'll be giving this to my mum for her 70th birthday, and I hope she enjoys it. It's in some of her favourite colours. So I hope this has shown you a few things that you can do with some of those beautiful distress ink pads, and at least one idea for how you can use that beautiful bouquet stamp from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous. And you know, I'll be back with more very soon. Bye!